The contraction started just as the doctor confirmed I was only 2 centimeters dilated, and my mother's voice cut through my pain like winter wind. "Can't you hurry this up? I have dinner reservations at 8. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I finally understood what family truly means when I needed it most." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The hospital room light seemed too bright that evening as I gripped the bedsheets through another contraction. 36 hours of labor had left me exhausted, my hair plastered to my forehead with sweat, while my mother Eleanor checked her watch for the 5th time in an hour. I had hoped having her there would fill the void left by Jake, my boyfriend who had disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. Instead, her impatience made me feel more alone than ever. "Mom, please," I whispered between ragged breaths. "This isn't exactly something I can schedule." The monitors beeped steadily as my baby's heartbeat remained strong, despite my body's struggle to bring her into the world. Eleanor sighed dramatically, her designer handbag perched on her lap like a shield between us. "Well, you should have thought about that before getting yourself into this situation. I'm missing the Harrington Gala for this." The words stung even through the haze of pain. 7 months ago, when I'd shown up at her doorstep with tears streaming down my face and a positive pregnancy test in hand, I'd hoped for comfort. Instead, I received a lecture about responsibility and a reluctant offer to help manage the situation. When I refused to consider termination, the disappointment in her eyes cut deeper than Jake's abandonment. My nurse Mariana entered the room with quiet efficiency, checking my vitals while offering a reassuring smile. "How are we doing, Sarah?" she asked, her kind eyes a stark contrast to my mother's irritated glance. "The doctor will be back to check your progress soon." I nodded gratefully, finding more comfort in this stranger's presence than in my mother's reluctant companionship. Eleanor stood abruptly. "I'm going to find decent coffee. This hospital swill is undrinkable." The door closed behind her with a definitive click, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Mariana adjusted my IV with gentle hands. "Your mom seems—" She hesitated, professional discretion battling with obvious concern. "Difficult?" I supplied with a weak laugh that transformed into a groan as another contraction gripped me. "She's always been that way. Nothing I do is ever good enough." Mariana helped me shift positions, placing a cool cloth on my forehead. "Well, I think what you're doing right now is pretty incredible," she said simply. The unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes that had nothing to do with physical pain. I hadn't planned on becoming a single mother at 28. My career as an elementary school art teacher was just gaining momentum, and my relationship with Jake had seemed stable if not passionate. We'd been careful, but life found a way, as it often does. When the second pink line appeared on the test, I felt terror followed by a strange, fierce determination. This child was mine, wanted or not, planned or not. Jake's reaction had been predictable in retrospect. His face had drained of color as he paced my small apartment. "I can't do this, Sarah. I'm not ready to be a father." Within a week, he'd moved out, leaving behind half-empty drawers and a hole in my future plans. I'd called my mother then, hoping that maternal instinct might transcend our complicated relationship. Eleanor had always been more concerned with appearances than emotions. My childhood was comfortable but cold, filled with expectations I could never quite meet. My father's death when I was 12 had only hardened her, turning grief into a brittle ambition that left no room for weakness. When I chose teaching over the law career she'd envisioned, our relationship had fractured further. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The contractions were coming closer together now, each one a tidal wave that threatened to pull me under. I focused on my breathing techniques from the birthing classes I'd attended alone, visualizing each breath bringing my daughter closer to me. The doctor returned, confirming I had progressed to 5 centimeters. "You're doing great, Sarah. Halfway there," she encouraged. Eleanor returned with her coffee, her lipstick freshly applied, looking more like she was attending a business meeting than her daughter's labor. Any progress? I've had to reschedule dinner twice now. The doctor raised an eyebrow but maintained her professional demeanor. Labor takes time, especially with first babies. It could be several more hours. My mother's exasperated sigh felt like a physical blow. I told you to schedule a C-section, Sarah. This is exactly why planning ahead matters. The doctor excused herself as Mariana returned to check my monitors. I closed my eyes, too exhausted to defend my choice for a natural birth unless medically necessary. Another contraction seized me, and I reached blindly for support. It was Mariana's hand that met mine, not my mother's. Squeeze as hard as you need to, she offered, her steady presence an anchor as pain washed over me. Eleanor watched from a distance, scrolling through her phone with manicured fingers. When the contraction passed, Mariana helped me sip water through a straw. Your daughter is strong, she observed, looking at the heart rate monitor. Just like her mother. The simple validation brought fresh tears. For months, I'd been preparing for this moment alone. Setting up a nursery in my one-bedroom apartment, working extra art commission jobs to save for maternity leave, attending prenatal appointments with only strangers for company. I'd convinced myself I was fine, that independence was strength, but here in this hospital room, the loneliness felt overwhelming. As evening deepened into night, my labor intensified. Eleanor stepped out repeatedly for phone calls, each time returning more visibly agitated. During one particularly difficult contraction, when I was crying out in pain, I heard Mariana gently suggest, "Maybe you could hold your daughter's hand? It might help her." My mother's response was curt. Sarah needs to learn to handle difficult situations. I'm not helping by coddling her. The words floated through my pain-fogged consciousness, familiar in their dismissal. How many times had I heard variations of this throughout my life? When I'd fallen off my bike at 7 and came home with bloody knees. When I'd failed to make the debate team in high school. When Jake had left me pregnant and alone. Always the same message. My struggles were inconvenient. My pain an imposition. Around midnight, the doctor announced I had reached 8 centimeters. You're in transition now, Sarah. This is the hardest part, but you're doing beautifully. Eleanor had moved to the small sofa in the corner, her irritation now mixed with reluctant resignation. Will it be much longer? I have an early meeting tomorrow. Something snapped inside me. Between gasping breaths, I turned to her. If you need to go, Mom, just go. I don't want you staying out of obligation. The words hung in the air as another contraction hit, this one so intense that my vision blurred at the edges. Through the pain, I heard Eleanor stand. Fine, call me when it's over. I'll visit tomorrow after my meeting. Her heels clicked decisively on the linoleum floor as she gathered her belongings. I couldn't even find the energy to be surprised or hurt. It was merely the confirmation of what I'd always known but refused to accept. My mother's support had always been conditional, available only when convenient and without emotional investment. As the door closed behind her, Mariana squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, she said simply. I shook my head, focusing on breathing through the fading contraction. It's better this way, I managed, finding unexpected relief in Eleanor's absence. The room suddenly felt less tense, as if her disappointment had been taking up physical space. What happened next would change everything. As dawn approached, and I entered the final stage of labor, the door opened again. I expected to see the doctor, but instead, Eleanor stood there, her perfect composure noticeably disturbed. She hesitated at the threshold, something unfamiliar in her expression. Before she could speak, Mariana stepped into the hallway. Mrs. Mitchell, if you're returning, I need to be clear about something, I heard Mariana say, her voice professional but firm. I overheard your phone conversation in the hallway earlier. If you're only here because your friend Caroline suggested it would look bad, if you weren't present for your grandchild's birth, perhaps reconsider your priorities. My heart froze despite the physical exertion of labor. I hadn't known about any such conversation. Eleanor's response was too quiet to hear, but Mariana continued. Your daughter is bringing life into this world with incredible courage. She deserves genuine support, not someone checking their watch." There was a moment of silence before Eleanor appeared in the doorway again, her face unreadable. She approached my bedside slowly, as if crossing unfamiliar territory. Without meeting my eyes, she reached for my hand, just as another contraction began. I was too surprised to reject the gesture, and found myself gripping her fingers as the pain peaked and receded. When I could speak again, I searched her face. "You don't have to stay, Mom." My voice sounded stronger than I felt. Eleanor's expression shifted, something crumbling behind her carefully constructed facade. "Sarah," she began, then stopped. For perhaps the first time in my life, my always articulate mother seemed at a loss for words. The doctor returned then, announcing it was time to push. The next hour became a blur of exertion, encouragement, and pain, unlike anything I'd experienced. Through it all, surprisingly, Eleanor remained, holding my hand and even helping support my back when I needed to change positions. Her designer blouse became wrinkled, her perfect makeup smudged, but she stayed. At 5:42 a.m., with one final tremendous push, my daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that filled the room. "She's perfect," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, vernix-covered infant on my chest. The universe narrowed to this tiny being, her unfocused eyes blinking up at me, her tiny hand reflexively grasping my finger when I offered it. In that moment, looking at my daughter's face, everything shifted. The months of fear, uncertainty, and loneliness dissolved in the profound recognition that I would never let this child question her worth or feel her struggles were inconvenient. I would break the cycle that had shaped my relationship with Eleanor. Love would not be conditional in my daughter's world. When I finally looked up, I was startled to see tears on my mother's face. Eleanor Mitchell, who prided herself on emotional control, was crying silently as she gazed at her granddaughter. "She looks like you did," she whispered, her voice uncharacteristically gentle, "when they first put you in my arms." Later, after my daughter Lily had been measured, weighed, and swaddled, after I had been tended to and moved to a recovery room, Eleanor sat beside my bed while I cradled my sleeping newborn. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting golden stripes across the hospital blanket. "Mariana told me what she overheard," I said quietly, not wanting to wake Lily. Eleanor's gaze dropped to her hands, the perfect manicure now chipped from hours of labor support. "I said terrible things," she admitted, the confession clearly difficult. "About being here out of obligation, about appearances." I waited, expecting justifications or deflections. Instead, she continued, "When I was in that hallway talking to Caroline, suddenly I heard myself, really heard the words coming out of my mouth. And then Mariana confronted me. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. She said I was missing the miracle happening in that room, that someday I would regret prioritizing a dinner party over witnessing my granddaughter's first breath." The silence stretched between us, filled with decades of missed connections and emotional distance. "Why has it always been so hard for you to just be there for me?" I finally asked, the question I'd carried my entire life finally finding voice in this moment of raw vulnerability. Eleanor's composed exterior cracked further. "Because I never knew how," she said simply. "My own mother was even colder than I've been to you. I thought strength meant never showing weakness, never admitting need." She reached out tentatively to touch Lily's tiny hand. "I convinced myself I was helping you become independent, but the truth is, I was protecting myself from feeling too much." As Lily stirred against my chest, Eleanor continued, her voice barely audible. "When your father died, I couldn't bear the pain. So I locked it away, along with every other emotion that threatened my control. I thought I was teaching you resilience, but watching you these past hours." She shook her head, words failing her again. I looked down at my daughter's perfect face, understanding blooming within me. "You were doing the best you could with what you knew," I said softly. Not an absolution, exactly, but an acknowledgement. The hurt of a lifetime couldn't be erased in a single conversation, but perhaps it could begin to heal. "I want to do better," Eleanor said, the words clearly foreign to her tongue. "For Lily. For you." I don't know if I can change completely, but Mariana made me see what I stand to lose if I don't try. She hesitated. Would you let me help? Not take over, just help? Quote, the question hung between us, weighted with history and possibility. Looking at Lily, I thought about cycles, how they perpetuate unless consciously broken. My mother had carried forward the emotional distance she'd learned from her own mother. I had the chance to create something different for my daughter. We can try, I answered carefully, but there need to be boundaries. Real support, not criticism disguised as help. Eleanor nodded, a new humility in her expression that I'd never seen before. I understand. Mariana came in then to check on us, her shift nearly over. She smiled at the tableau we presented, 3 generations of women in the quiet morning light. How are we doing? She asked, checking Lily's swaddling with practiced hands. We're finding our way, I answered, exchanging a look with Eleanor that acknowledged both our painful past and possible future. Mariana nodded as if she understood exactly what I meant. As she turned to leave, I called after her. Thank you. For everything. She paused at the door, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Sometimes the people who come into our lives briefly leave the most lasting impact, she said. Your daughter is beautiful, and so is your strength. Trust that. As the door closed behind her, I looked down at Lily, then across at Eleanor. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Old patterns wouldn't disappear overnight, but in that hospital room, as morning light strengthened into day, something new had begun. A chance to redefine what family meant for all 3 of us. The first 3 months with Lily passed in a blur of sleepless nights and newfound joy that transformed my small apartment into the center of my universe. Each tiny milestone, her first intentional smile, the way her eyes tracked my movements across the room, the soft coos that seemed like the beginnings of conversation, filled me with wonder. I'd expected motherhood to be challenging as a single parent, but I hadn't anticipated how the difficulties would be balanced by moments of such profound connection. Eleanor's promise to help manifested in unexpected ways. Instead of the criticism I'd braced for, she appeared every Sunday with home-cooked meals for my freezer, quietly folding laundry while I nursed Lily. Our conversations remained cautious, decades of tension not easily dissolved, but there was an unfamiliar gentleness in her interactions with both me and her granddaughter. She has your determination, Eleanor observed one afternoon as Lily frowned in concentration, trying to grasp a colorful rattle just beyond her reach. I glanced at my mother, surprised by the hint of pride in her voice. I always thought that was stubbornness, I replied, the words carrying the weight of countless childhood disagreements. Eleanor's hands stilled on the onesie she was folding. Stubbornness and determination are the same quality viewed through different lenses, she said quietly. I should have appreciated yours more. The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes that I blinked away before she could notice. The shift in our relationship remained fragile, like thin ice that might crack under too much pressure. There were still moments when Eleanor's old criticisms surfaced, comments about the size of my apartment, suggestions that I should consider a more practical career than teaching art. But now, remarkably, she would catch herself, sometimes mid-sentence, and redirect. I'm doing it again, aren't I? She asked one day after starting to question my decision to continue breastfeeding beyond 6 months. The self-awareness was new territory for both of us. Yes, I answered honestly, but I appreciate that you noticed. These small moments of growth accumulated slowly, building something between us that, while not yet trust, at least resembled respect. My maternity leave was drawing to a close, and the reality of balancing teaching with single parenthood loomed like an approaching storm. The daycare I could afford had a waiting list stretching months beyond my scheduled return date, and my modest savings had dwindled, despite careful budgeting. I spent nights after Lily fell asleep scrolling through childcare options, calculating and recalculating figures that refused to align with my resources. I've been thinking, Eleanor said during one of her Sunday visits, her voice carefully neutral as she stirred a pot of soup on my small stove. About your childcare situation. I tensed, anticipating a lecture about financial planning or career choices. Instead, she continued, I'd like to watch Lily while you're teaching. I can adjust my consulting schedule to be available during school hours. The offer hung between us, both tempting and terrifying. Having Eleanor care for Lily would solve my immediate crisis, but it would also irrevocably shift our cautiously rebuilding relationship. Why? I asked simply, needing to understand her motivation before I could consider accepting. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, her attention seemingly focused on the soup. When she finally spoke, her voice carried an unfamiliar vulnerability. Because I missed so much with you, Sarah. Because Mariana was right that day in the hospital. I've spent my life prioritizing the wrong things. She turned to face me, her usually perfect composure slightly frayed at the edges. And because I think this might be my last chance to get something right. The raw honesty was so unexpected that I found myself speechless. This wasn't the Eleanor I'd grown up with, who measured success in achievements and appearances. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had always existed beneath the carefully constructed facade I'd never been allowed to see. We would need clear boundaries, I said finally, practical considerations tempering my emotional response. And I'd need to know you'll respect my parenting decisions even when you disagree with them. Eleanor nodded, accepting these terms without the defense I'd anticipated. I'd also want to contribute financially, she added. Not in a way that creates obligation, but to help ease your burden. We spent the afternoon outlining a framework for this new arrangement, the detailed planning providing safer ground than the emotional undercurrents flowing beneath our conversation. By evening, we had a tentative schedule and understanding that felt both terrifying and promising. As she prepared to leave, Eleanor paused at the door. I know I haven't earned your trust yet, she said quietly, but I hope you'll give me the chance to try. I watched her drive away, Lily sleeping peacefully against my shoulder, and wondered if people truly could change at their core, or if we were simply setting ourselves up for familiar disappointments. The answer began revealing itself in the weeks that followed. Eleanor arrived each morning precisely on time, her designer clothing gradually replaced by more practical outfits as she discovered the impossibility of maintaining perfection around an increasingly mobile infant. She followed my instructions about naps and feeding with surprising diligence, keeping detailed notes in an elegant leather journal that soon became filled with observations about Lily's development. She reached for the red block first today every time I offered the set. Eleanor reported one afternoon as I returned from school, her voice animated in a way I rarely heard. And she seems to recognize that song you sing during bath time. She smiled immediately when I hummed it. These small details, carefully collected throughout the day, became a bridge between us, common ground where we could meet without the weight of our history pressing down. My return to teaching had been both more challenging and more fulfilling than anticipated. My sixth-grade students, with their combination of childhood enthusiasm and emerging teenage complexity, provided a welcome counterbalance to the all-consuming nature of new motherhood. In my classroom, surrounded by art supplies and young creative minds, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been temporarily submerged in Lily's needs. Ms. Mitchell, is that your baby? Emily asked one afternoon, pointing to the photo on my desk. When I nodded, she studied it with solemn attention. She looks happy. I bet you're a good mom. The simple observation from a 12-year-old struck me with unexpected force. Was I a good mother? In the constant worry about logistics and finances, I hadn't paused to consider that fundamental question. That evening, watching Lily explore the texture of her blanket with focused concentration, I realized that despite all the uncertainties, one thing was clear. She was secure in my love. Whatever else I might get wrong in this journey of parenthood, that essential foundation was firmly in place. The revelation brought a peace I hadn't experienced since those 2 pink lines had appeared on the pregnancy test nearly a year ago. As autumn deepened into winter, our arrangement with Eleanor developed its own rhythm. She arrived each morning with a thermos of coffee for me and increasingly creative ideas for engaging Lily's developing mind. Weekends remained my sacred time alone with my daughter, establishing our own traditions and connections separate from Eleanor's influence. The first significant test of our fragile equilibrium came when Lily fell ill with a high fever that sent us to the emergency room at midnight. I'd called Eleanor in a panic before the ambulance arrived, my terror overriding any hesitation about reaching out. She met us at the hospital, her hair uncombed and face bare of makeup, looking older and somehow more human than I'd ever seen her. It's likely just a viral infection, the pediatrician reassured us after examining Lily. But with infants this young, we take every precaution. As they prepared to admit Lily for observation, I felt a wave of exhaustion threatening to overwhelm me. Eleanor must have noticed, because she gently guided me to a chair in the corner of the examination room. "You need to rest," she said firmly. "I'll stay awake and watch her. The nurses have my number if anything changes." When I started to protest, she added, "Sarah, you can't pour from an empty cup. Let me help you in this way." The words were so unlike her usual self-sufficiency rhetoric that I found myself nodding in agreement, too drained to argue. I woke hours later to find Eleanor standing by Lily's hospital crib, one hand resting lightly on my daughter's chest, as if to reassure herself of each breath. She was speaking softly, words not meant for me to hear. "I made so many mistakes with your mother," she whispered to the sleeping infant. "I was trying to make her strong, but instead I made her feel alone. I won't do that to you, little one. And I'm trying to make it right with her, even if it might be too late." The vulnerability in her voice kept me motionless, unwilling to interrupt this rare glimpse behind my mother's carefully constructed walls. As I watched her gentle attentiveness to my child, I realized that whatever her failings with me had been, they hadn't stemmed from a lack of love, but rather from a fundamental misunderstanding of what love should look like in action. Lily's fever broke by morning, her resilient little body bouncing back with the remarkable capacity of the very young. As we prepared to take her home, the pediatrician provided care instructions that Eleanor wrote down with meticulous attention to detail. "I'll stay with you today," she offered as we loaded Lily into her car seat. "You must be exhausted." In the past, I would have refused, protecting my independence at all costs. But the night had shifted something between us, allowing me to accept help without interpreting it as control. "Thank you," I said simply. "I could use the support." At home, Eleanor moved through my small apartment with uncharacteristic ease, preparing soup and tea while I settled Lily for a nap. We sat together at my tiny kitchen table, the steam from our mugs creating a momentary barrier between us. "You're a wonderful mother, Sarah," Eleanor said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Much better than I was." The admission hung in the air between us, too significant to casually acknowledge. "I learned a lot from you," I replied carefully. "Some lessons about what to do, others about what I wanted to do differently." It was the most honest assessment of our relationship I'd ever voiced aloud, neither an accusation nor an absolution. Eleanor nodded, accepting this truth without defense. "I always thought strength meant never showing vulnerability," she said, staring into her tea as if reading patterns in the leaves. "My own mother taught me that emotions were weaknesses to be conquered. When your father died, I doubled down on that belief, convinced that if I allowed myself to feel the full weight of grief, I would shatter completely. I remembered those months after Dad's heart attack, how Eleanor had immersed herself in work, arranging the funeral with efficient detachment, while I cried myself to sleep in a bedroom that suddenly felt cavernous without his nightly stories. "I needed you to grieve with me," I said softly. "I needed to know I wasn't alone in missing him." "I know that now," she whispered, her composed facade cracking slightly. "But then I truly believed I was protecting you by modeling composure. By the time I realized my mistake, the distance between us had grown so vast I didn't know how to bridge it." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "Until Lily gave us both a second chance." That conversation marked a turning point, not an instant healing of old wounds, but an acknowledgement of their existence that allowed them to finally begin mending. As winter melted into spring, Eleanor became not just Lily's caregiver, but a genuine presence in our lives. She learned to follow my lead in parenting decisions, offering suggestions rather than directives, and I found myself increasingly able to consider her input without automatically bristling. Lily's first birthday approached with the warm promise of early summer. She was walking now, unsteady steps that sent her crashing into furniture and dissolving into giggles rather than tears. Her personality emerged more clearly each day, determined like me, observant like her grandmother, with a joyful enthusiasm entirely her own. "I'd like to host her birthday party," Eleanor suggested one afternoon as Lily practiced her newfound mobility between us. "Nothing extravagant," she added quickly, seeing my hesitation. Just something to celebrate this milestone. Perhaps in the park near your apartment? The offer represented more than a simple birthday party. It was Eleanor publicly acknowledging and celebrating my choice to become a single mother, a decision she had initially met with disapproval and concern. That would be nice, I agreed, watching as Lily pulled herself up on the coffee table with a triumphant expression. She'd like that. The day of the party dawned clear and perfect, the kind of June morning that seemed designed for celebrations. Eleanor had kept her promise about avoiding extravagance, but her attention to detail was evident in the tasteful decorations and carefully selected food. A small gathering of my friends, fellow teachers, and neighbors filled the park pavilion she had reserved, creating a circle of community around Lily that made my heart swell. "You've built something beautiful here," Mariana observed as she joined me at the edge of the festivities. I had stayed in touch with the nurse who had witnessed the beginning of my transformation with Eleanor, occasionally sending photos of Lily's milestones. Her presence at the birthday party felt like a completion of a circle, a family that extends beyond blood. I watched as Eleanor helped Lily blow out her single candle, supporting my daughter's wobbly stance with gentle hands. "It's not what I expected," I admitted, "but maybe it's exactly what we all needed." Mariana squeezed my arm in understanding before moving to congratulate the birthday girl, leaving me to observe the gathering with a sense of quiet wonder. Later, as guests began to depart and Lily napped in her stroller, exhausted from the excitement, Eleanor approached with a small, wrapped package. "This isn't for Lily," she explained, placing it in my hands. "It's for you." Inside the carefully wrapped box lay a silver frame containing a photograph I had never seen before. My father holding me as an infant, his expression a mixture of pride and awe, while Eleanor looked on with unmistakable love in her eyes. "I found it while going through some old albums," she said softly. "It reminded me of how we began, before fear and grief complicated everything. The image captured a moment of pure connection, a family whole and full of possibility. We were happy then," I whispered, tracing the outline of my father's smile. Eleanor nodded, her composure momentarily faltering. "We were. And in different ways, I think we might be finding our way back to happiness now." As the afternoon light softened around us, Lily stirred in her stroller, reaching out with sleepy determination. I lifted her into my arms, this miracle who had inadvertently become the bridge between generations. "Thank you," I said to Eleanor, the words encompassing far more than the photograph. "For trying, for staying, for changing." Eleanor's smile held the weight of our shared journey, the pain and distance, the tentative steps toward healing, the hope for what might still grow between us. "Thank you for giving me the chance," she replied simply. "Some lessons come later than they should, but that doesn't make them less valuable." As we gathered our things to head home, I realized that the story of my family was still being written, each day adding new lines to a narrative more complex and beautiful than I could have imagined that frightening night in the delivery room. The cycle of conditional love that had shaped Eleanor's relationship with her mother, and subsequently with me, had been interrupted, not erased, but fundamentally altered for Lily's generation. Watching my mother carefully fold the birthday banner, her movements deliberate and focused, I understood that true strength wasn't found in emotional distance, but in the courage to remain open despite the risk of pain. Eleanor was learning this lesson late in life, but with a commitment that commanded respect. And I was learning that forgiveness wasn't a single moment of absolution, but a daily choice to move forward together, acknowledging the past without being imprisoned by it. "Ready to go home?" Eleanor asked, the simple question carrying layers of meaning between us. Lily reached out from my arms, patting her grandmother's cheek with sticky fingers that left traces of frosting behind. Eleanor laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that I had rarely heard throughout my childhood. "Yes," I answered, smiling at the sight of my proper, controlled mother with birthday cake on her face and joy in her eyes. "I think we're all ready now." And as we walked together through the dappled sunlight of the park, Lily babbling happily between us, I felt the truth of those words settle deep in my heart, a foundation for whatever came next in our imperfect, precious journey as a family rediscovering itself. The autumn leaves created a kaleidoscope of color outside my classroom window as I watched my students work on their self-portrait projects. 3 years had passed since Lily's birth, transforming not just my body but the entire landscape of my existence. She was in preschool now 3 mornings a week, a vibrant whirlwind of questions and observations that kept me constantly amazed. The temporary arrangement with Eleanor had evolved into something neither of us could have predicted that fraught day in the delivery room, a genuine partnership in raising Lily that honored my role as mother while creating space for Eleanor to be the kind of grandmother she'd never had herself. "Ms. Mitchell, is mine done?" Zach asked, holding up a colorful interpretation of himself that featured an improbable number of limbs and a smile that took up half his face. I knelt beside his desk, taking in the joyful chaos of his creation. "Art is never really done," I explained, "but if you feel it shows who you are, then yes, it's perfect." He beamed, adding one final splash of yellow to his already vibrant hair. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a text from Eleanor. "Lily made up a song about turtles today, recording attached. Too precious not to share." I smiled, saving the video to watch during my lunch break. These small moments, carefully documented and shared between us, had become the foundation of our rebuilt relationship. Not perfect, still occasionally strained by old patterns that emerged in moments of stress, but genuine in a way I'd never experienced with my mother before. The journey hadn't been linear. After Lily's first birthday party, Eleanor had stepped back slightly, conscious of giving us space while maintaining her role in our lives. She'd reduced her consulting hours permanently, creating a schedule that allowed her to care for Lily 2 days a week while I taught, supplementing the preschool program we'd found that fit perfectly within my teacher's salary. "You should consider dating again," Eleanor had suggested during one of our Sunday dinners, about a year after Lily's birth. The comment had caught me off guard, nearly causing me to drop the pasta I was draining. "What brought this on?" I'd asked, wary of her motivation. Eleanor had carefully folded her napkin, a gesture I recognized as her gathering thoughts. "You're young, Sarah. Being a mother doesn't mean the rest of your life goes on hold." She'd paused, choosing her words with uncharacteristic care. "I made that mistake after your father died. Convinced myself that focusing solely on parenting and career was noble, rather than acknowledging it was fear keeping me isolated." The observation had struck me with its self-awareness and gentle wisdom. This was the Eleanor who had been emerging gradually since Lily's birth, reflective, increasingly vulnerable, capable of insights that surprised us both. "I'm not sure I'm ready," I'd admitted, setting the pasta on the table between us. "And dating as a single mom isn't exactly straightforward." Eleanor had nodded, accepting my hesitation without pushing. "When and if you are, I'm here to help with Lily." The offer had been presented without pressure, a gift I could accept or decline on my own timeline. This new pattern between us, advice followed by space, support without expectation, had become the hallmark of our evolving relationship. The school bell jolted me back to the present, signaling the end of the art period. As my students filed out in their characteristic combination of chaos and reluctant order, I checked the time. My afternoon class would arrive soon, but I had just enough minutes to watch Eleanor's video. Lily's high, sweet voice filled my phone's speaker, her made-up turtle song both nonsensical and oddly profound in the way only children's creations can be. The camera panned to show her dancing in Eleanor's living room, twirling with the uninhibited joy that never failed to make my heart expand. Eleanor's voice came from behind the camera. "What inspired this masterpiece, Miss Lily?" My daughter's response was immediate and delivered with absolute conviction. "Turtles are slow, but they never give up. Like me and you and Grandma." The simple observation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Later that evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed with her favorite turtle stuffed animal and 3 bedtime stories, she always negotiated for just one more, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine. The apartment was the same one I'd lived in when Lily was born, but it had transformed around us, filled with artwork, photographs, and the colorful chaos of a preschooler's possessions. I'd considered moving to a larger place several times, but there was something about these walls that felt like a testament to our journey. My phone lit up with a text from David, a science teacher at my school whose quiet humor and thoughtful nature had gradually drawn me out of my self-imposed romantic isolation. "Still on for coffee Saturday?" The message was simple but carried the weight of possibility. After months of hallway conversations and shared lunch breaks, I'd finally accepted his invitation for a real date. Eleanor had immediately offered to take Lily for the day, her enthusiasm barely contained beneath a veneer of casual support. "Looking forward to it," I replied, allowing myself to acknowledge the flutter of anticipation in my stomach. It had been nearly 4 years since I'd been on a proper date, and the prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. David knew about Lily, understood that she was my priority, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know both of us better. His patience had given me the time I needed to consider opening my carefully constructed world to include someone new. The following morning brought an unexpected challenge. Lily woke with a fever and the telltale rash of chickenpox, despite her vaccinations. Breakthrough case. The pediatrician confirmed over the phone after I described her symptoms. Keep her comfortable and isolated from other children for the next week. My heart sank as I calculated the logistics. A week of missed school for Lily, childcare challenges for me, and the canceled date with David. I called Eleanor immediately, expecting to coordinate a care schedule that would allow me to miss minimal work. Her response surprised me. "I'll take the whole week off," she said without hesitation. "You've used most of your sick days already this year, and I can easily rearrange my consulting calls to evenings." The offer was generous but triggered an instinctive resistance, the old fear of becoming too dependent on help that might come with invisible strings attached. "Mom, that's too much to ask," I began, the familiar pattern of polite refusal rising automatically. But Eleanor interrupted gently. "Sarah, it's not about asking. It's about family supporting each other through challenges. Let me do this." The simple statement disarmed my defenses, allowing me to accept with genuine gratitude rather than reluctance. By mid-morning, Eleanor had arrived with an arsenal of chickenpox remedies, children's books, and quiet activities to keep Lily entertained through her recovery. As I prepared to leave for school, Lily's tearful plea nearly broke my resolve. "Mommy, don't go," she whimpered from the couch where she was huddled in her favorite blanket, spots covering her small face and arms. I knelt beside her, smoothing back her dark curls. "I have to teach today, sweetie, but Grandma's staying with you, and I'll be home right after school with a special surprise." The promise only partially appeased her, and as I gathered my teaching materials, the weight of maternal guilt pressed heavily on my shoulders. Eleanor must have noticed my struggle, because she followed me to the door. "She'll be fine, Sarah," she assured me quietly. "Children are remarkably resilient." I nodded, swallowing against the tightness in my throat. Then Eleanor added something that stopped me in my tracks. "You're not failing her by going to work. You're showing her that mothers are whole people with responsibilities and passions beyond motherhood." That's a powerful lesson. The validation, so different from the criticism I'd grown up expecting, left me momentarily speechless. "Thank you," I managed finally. "That means a lot, especially coming from you." Eleanor's smile held a hint of sadness, an acknowledgement of how rare such support had been in our past. "I'm learning too," she said simply, "every day." That week became an unexpected turning point in our family's story. Eleanor moved temporarily into our guest room to provide round-the-clock care for Lily, creating an improvised schedule that allowed me to maintain my teaching responsibilities while spending evenings with my recovering daughter. I watched in quiet amazement as my mother, once so concerned with appearance and propriety, sat for hours applying calamine lotion to Lily's spots, telling stories, and creating elaborate puppet shows with stuffed animals. "She's different with Lily than she was with me," I observed to David during a phone call that had replaced our canceled coffee date. He had been understanding about the postponement, even sending a care package of craft supplies for Lily that had arrived the second day of her illness. "People can change when given the chance," he replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes they just need the right motivation." His words stayed with me as I observed the gentle attentiveness Eleanor showed my daughter. Was Lily the motivation, or had the transformation begun earlier? I remembered Mariana's confrontation in the hospital hallway, the pivotal moment when Eleanor had been forced to hear her own priorities spoken aloud. Perhaps change required both external challenge and internal willingness, a combination that had finally aligned in my mother's life. By the weekend, Lily's spots were fading, and her energy returning in bursts that left Eleanor and me taking turns entertaining her increasingly active imagination. "Pirates don't get chicken pox," she declared, wearing an improvised eye patch made from one of my scarves as she navigated the living room furniture transformed into a pirate ship. "Is that so?" Eleanor played along, adjusting an imaginary spyglass. "And what about grandmas? Are they immune too?" Lily considered this seriously, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Grandmas are magic," she decided finally. "They can fight off anything." This simple child's logic brought unexpected emotion to Eleanor's expression, a vulnerability she no longer tried to hide from me. Later that evening, after Lily had finally surrendered to sleep, Eleanor and I sat in the kitchen sharing a pot of tea. "She thinks I'm magic," she said softly, turning her cup between her hands. "If only she knew how much I've gotten wrong over the years." I studied my mother's face, the elegant features now softened by age and perhaps by the gradual loosening of the rigid control she'd maintained for so long. "You're getting a lot right now," I offered. "That's what matters to Lily. And to me." The words felt monumental between us, an acknowledgement of both past pain and present healing. Eleanor's eyes met mine, a lifetime of unspoken emotions passing between us. "I've been afraid my entire adult life," she confessed, the admission clearly difficult. "Afraid of vulnerability, of needing others, of failing. After your father died, that fear calcified into something I mistook for strength." She paused, gathering herself. "Watching you with Lily, your openness, your willingness to be imperfect but fully present, I've realized how much I missed by hiding behind perfection. The raw honesty created a moment of perfect understanding between us, a bridge across decades of miscommunication and hurt." "It's never too late to change the story," I said gently, echoing words my art therapy professor had once shared. "Each day is a new canvas." Eleanor smiled at the metaphor, reaching across the table to cover my hand with hers, a gesture of connection that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. As Eleanor's temporary stay extended through Lily's full recovery, our apartment adjusted to accommodate 3 generations under one roof. The arrangement revealed new dimensions of our evolving relationship. Eleanor's unexpected sense of humor that emerged during board game nights, her talent for storytelling that captivated Lily at bedtime, the quiet way she'd begun documenting our family's daily life through photographs that captured moments I was too busy to notice. "Have you thought about making this more permanent?" she asked one evening as we prepared dinner together, the question carefully casual. I paused in chopping vegetables, considering her meaning. "The 3 of us living together," she clarified, keeping her focus on the sauce she was stirring. "Not here. Your apartment is lovely but small for 3. But perhaps we could find a place with enough space for everyone to have their own area." The suggestion would have triggered immediate resistance in the past, a perceived attempt to control or direct my life. But now I found myself genuinely considering the possibilities. "What about your house?" I asked, resuming my chopping. The elegant suburban home where I'd grown up had always seemed more showcase than sanctuary, but Eleanor had been making changes there too, converting the formal dining room into a play space for Lily, replacing pristine white furniture with more practical pieces. "It's too far from your school," she replied pragmatically, "and too full of old patterns perhaps. I thought we might start fresh somewhere that belongs to all of us." The thoughtfulness behind her suggestion touched me deeply. This wasn't about convenience or economics, but about creating a shared future that honored our individual needs. "Let me think about it," I said, not ready to commit but no longer automatically resistant. Eleanor nodded, accepting this middle ground with the patience she'd been cultivating. "Of course. It's just an idea to consider." The conversation shifted to other topics, but the seed had been planted. 2 weeks later, life had returned to its normal rhythm. Lily was back at preschool, Eleanor had resumed her regular schedule of caring for her 2 days a week, and I had finally rescheduled my coffee date with David. As I prepared for this long-postponed meeting, choosing an outfit that felt both professional and feminine. I realized how much had changed since Lily's birth. The overwhelmed single mother fighting for survival had gradually given way to a woman capable of balancing multiple dimensions of life. Still imperfect, still learning, but increasingly confident in her choices. "You look pretty, Mommy," Lily observed from my bedroom doorway, her favorite stuffed turtle clutched against her chest. "Are you going to marry Teacher David?" The innocent question made me laugh, even as it highlighted the serious consideration behind my casual coffee date. "No, sweetheart. We're just having coffee and talking. People get to know each other for a long time before they decide about marrying." Lily nodded sagely, processing this information with the seriousness she brought to all new concepts. "Like how you and Grandma had to practice being nice to each other?" The perceptiveness of her observation momentarily stunned me. "Something like that," I acknowledged, kneeling to her level. "Relationships take time and work, even in families, especially in families." "But worth it," she declared with the absolute certainty of a 4-year-old, before skipping off to continue whatever game had been interrupted by her fashion assessment. I watched her go, marveling at the wisdom that sometimes emerged from her still-developing understanding of the world. The coffee date with David unfolded with surprising ease, conversation flowing naturally between topics, laughter coming readily, the connection between us strengthening in person rather than diluting, as often happens when professional relationships attempt to cross into personal territory. As we walked from the cafe to a nearby park, his hand occasionally brushing mine, I found myself considering possibilities I'd long set aside. "I'd like to meet Lily properly," he said as we paused to watch ducks on a small pond, "whenever you think it's appropriate." The request was presented without pressure, an invitation rather than an expectation. I appreciated his understanding of the careful consideration that went into introducing someone new into my daughter's life. "She already knows you as Teacher David," I replied, smiling at the thought of her earlier question about marriage. "But I think a park playdate might be a good next step." The suggestion felt right. Casual, time-limited, in a neutral setting where Lily would be comfortable. David's smile indicated his agreement, and as we continued our walk, planning tentatively for the following weekend, I felt a flutter of hope for this new dimension of possibility in our lives. Later that evening, I called Eleanor to share highlights from the date. Our relationship had evolved to include this kind of sharing, not the forced confidences of manufactured closeness, but the natural exchange between people who had learned to genuinely care about each other's happiness. "He sounds wonderful," she said warmly, "and thoughtful about Lily's needs, which is the most important thing." "He is," I agreed, surprised by how much David's consideration of my daughter's place in my life had meant to me. "It's early days, but there's definite potential." Eleanor's response carried the wisdom she'd been accumulating through our journey together. "The best relationships grow slowly enough to build a strong foundation. You've always had good instincts about people, Sarah. Trust them." The validation, so different from the criticism or directive advice that had characterized our past interactions, reminded me how far we'd come. "I've been thinking about your suggestion," I said, changing the subject to the idea of finding a place together. "Maybe we could look at some options, just to see what's available." Eleanor's pleased surprise was evident even through the phone connection. "I'd like that very much," she replied simply. The weeks that followed brought a gentle expansion of our family circle. David joined us for weekend outings that gradually increased in duration and frequency as Lily grew comfortable with his presence. Eleanor began researching housing options that would accommodate our needs while respecting individual boundaries. My teaching took on new dimensions as I incorporated more of my personal artistic practice into the curriculum, inspired by watching Lily's creative development. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both secure and dynamic, routines providing stability while allowing space for growth and change. The approaching summer promised new adventures. A week at the beach house Eleanor had rented for all of us, Lily's first session at day camp, potential progress in both my budding relationship with David and our exploration of shared living arrangements. On the last day of the school year, as my students filed out with summer excitement radiating from their faces, I found a moment of quiet in my classroom. Surrounded by the creative evidence of a year's worth of artistic exploration, I allowed myself to fully recognize how profoundly my life had transformed since that terrifying night in the delivery room. The crisis that had seemed like an ending had instead become a beginning, painful and challenging, but ultimately opening doors to possibilities I couldn't have imagined. Eleanor's betrayal during those vulnerable hours of labor had exposed the fundamental brokenness in our relationship, a truth that needed to be acknowledged before healing could begin. Mariana's intervention, overhearing and then confronting the painful reality of my mother's priorities, had created the catalyst for change that might never have happened otherwise. And Lily, innocent and perfect in her newborn vulnerability, had offered us both the motivation to build something better than what had come before. The journey hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, when trust wavered, when the weight of past hurts seemed too heavy to move beyond. But gradually, through daily choices and constant small adjustments, we had created a new model of family, one based on honest communication, mutual respect, and the recognition that love, to be meaningful, must be both unconditional and actively demonstrated. As I gathered my belongings to head home, my phone chimed with a text from Eleanor. Lily and I made celebratory end-of-school cookies. Come hungry. Attached was a photo of my daughter, face smeared with chocolate and beaming with pride, beside my mother whose usually perfect appearance was equally disheveled by their baking adventure. The simple domestic scene captured everything that had changed. Eleanor finding joy in imperfection, Lily secure in the love of both her mother and grandmother, the three of us creating traditions that belonged uniquely to our reconstructed family. I saved the photo, adding it to the growing collection that documented our journey. Then I texted back, "On my way, save me the biggest cookie." As I drove home through the early summer sunshine, I reflected on the words Lily had improvised in her turtle song months ago. Turtles are slow, but they never give up. Like me and you and Grandma. The childish wisdom contained a profound truth about our family's transformation. Healing happens slowly, in small increments that require patience and persistence. But the journey is worth every difficult step. That evening, as the three of us sat on the balcony enjoying cookies and milk while planning our summer adventures, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with reaching a destination and everything to do with embracing the ongoing journey. Eleanor caught my eye across the table, her expression reflecting a similar awareness. Without words, we acknowledged what we both now understood, that family is not something we inherit passively, but something we create actively, a daily choice to show up with love even when it's difficult, a commitment to growth that never truly ends. "More milk, please," Lily requested, her chocolate-smeared smile the embodiment of uncomplicated joy. As I filled her cup, I silently thanked the circumstances that had forced Eleanor and me to confront the broken patterns between us. The pain of that hospital room confrontation had been necessary fertilizer for the growth that followed, not erasing the past but transforming it into the foundation for a healthier future. Sometimes the greatest betrayals become our most profound teachers, if we're brave enough to learn their lessons. And sometimes, in the midst of our deepest pain, we find unexpected allies, like a perceptive nurse who speaks truth when it's needed most, or a child whose innocent love creates a bridge where none seemed possible. The story of my family wasn't perfect, but it was authentically ours, with all its complexity, challenges, and hard-won moments of connection. As the sunset painted our small balcony in shades of gold and promise, I embraced the truth that had emerged from our journey. Real love isn't about perfection, but presence. Not about controlling outcomes, but showing up consistently through all of life's uncertainties. In choosing to break the cycle of conditional love that had shaped generations before us, Eleanor and I had given Lily a different inheritance. The knowledge that family, at its best, is not something we're merely born into, but something we courageously create together, one imperfect, beautiful day at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.